The rich boss who paid a poor young man with a dying donkey. But this young man accomplished something incredible. A long, long time ago, in a windswept valley nestled between rugged, unforgiving mountains, where the dust settled on everything and the streams ran dry in the summer, lived a poor young man. He was slender, with eyes that held a quiet sorrow and hands that were calloused from a lifetime of toil. He had no family to speak of. A fever had taken his parents when he was just a boy, leaving him with nothing but a small, dilapidated shack on a patch of barren, rocky land. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and the roof offered little comfort from the driving rain. The young man rarely spoke. He had learned early on that the words of the poor were like stones dropped into a deep well. They made a small sound and then were forgotten. His own small plot of land was stubborn and stingy, yielding nothing but rocks and weeds. The last of his stored grain was gone, and hunger had become a constant, gnawing companion. It was this hunger that pushed him toward the valley's edge, where the vast, green pastures of the richest landowner stretched out like a different world. News had traveled on the wind that the landowner, a man known for his immense wealth and harsh nature, was hiring extra hands for the season. With a stomach empty, but a heart full of desperate hope, the young man set off at dawn. He walked for hours under the harsh, unrelenting sun, his worn-out boots kicking up clouds of dust. When he finally arrived at the grand estate, the boss, a man with a portly figure, a face hardened by greed, and a condescending sneer, looked him over. The boss had clawed his way up from poverty himself, and he despised any reminder of his own humble beginnings, seeing weakness in every poor soul who came to him for help. "And what makes you think you're fit for real work?" The boss boomed, his voice dripping with disdain, a voice designed to make a man feel worthless. The young man lowered his gaze to the dusty ground. "I'll do whatever you ask, sir. I'm a hard worker." The boss let out a short, cruel laugh. "We'll see about that. Get to it. If your work is worth anything, you'll get your pay. If not, I'll have you thrown off my land before sunset." The young man worked like he never had before. He mended fences, cleared stones, and hauled water until his back screamed in protest and his hands bled. He worked through the scorching heat of the day and into the cool of the evening, driven by the promise of a wage that could buy him a sack of flour and a few precious seeds. At the end of the long, grueling week, he stood before the landowner, his body aching but his spirit hopeful. The boss, however, had no intention of parting with his coin. He smirked, a wicked glint in his eyes. "You worked, I'll give you that. But your pace was slow. Your payment is out in the back pasture." He gestured dismissively with his thumb. The young man's heart sank, but he walked dutifully toward the pasture, expecting a small bag of coins, perhaps less than he deserved, but something. What he found was not money. It was an old donkey, so skinny its ribs stood out like the rungs of a ladder. Its coat was dull and matted, and it stood with its head hung low, barely having the strength to breathe. It was a dying animal. The other workers, who had gathered to watch, erupted in laughter. "Look at that," one of them jeered. "The boss paid him with a bag of bones." "Hey, boy," shouted another. "You're going to buy bread with that, are you? Maybe it'll make a good soup." The laughter echoed across the fields, each cruel word a stone striking the young man's heart. He felt a familiar shame wash over him, hot and bitter. He wanted to shout, to protest, but he knew it was useless. The rich landowner had made his joke, and the world would laugh with him. He looked at the donkey, at its sad, weary eyes, and saw a reflection of his own struggle. He saw a creature that life had beaten down, discarded, and forgotten. Instead of anger, a wave of pity washed over him. He gently took the frayed rope tied around the donkey's neck, and without a word, began the long walk home, the sound of mockery following him until he was out of sight. But he did not see a worthless animal. He saw a fellow sufferer, He cared for the donkey day and night. He spent his last few pennies not on food for himself, but on a small bag of oats for the creature. He gathered the softest grass he could find from the riverbank and brought it fresh water in a bucket, holding it steady as the horse drank weakly. He spoke to it in a low, gentle voice, telling it stories he had never told another soul. He named him Hope. Days turned into weeks. Under the young man's tireless care, a miracle began to unfold. The donkey Hope slowly started to regain its strength. A new light appeared in its eyes. Its coat began to shine, and it started to put on weight. The animal that everyone had dismissed as walking death was coming back to life. With his newfound companion, the young man turned his attention to his own barren land. He fashioned a makeshift plow from old wood and tied it to Hope. Together, they began the impossible task of taming the rocky soil. The work was brutally hard. The plow would often snag on large stones, and the sun was merciless. But where the young man's strength failed, the donkey's endurance took over. And where the horse faltered, the young man's determination pushed them both forward. They were a team, two lonely souls bound by a shared will to survive. They worked from sunrise to sunset, clearing the stones one by one. The young man used the stones to build a low wall around his plot, a barrier against the wind and wandering animals. He dug an irrigation ditch from a small, hidden spring he had discovered high in the hills, channeling precious water down to his land. The people in the valley watched him, first with curiosity, then with disbelief. They had all written off that patch of land as cursed. The other rich landowners in the valley, friends of the cruel boss, scoffed at his efforts. They saw him toiling away and placed bets on how long it would take for him to give up. "He's trying to grow rocks," one said, laughing over a glass of expensive wine. "The boy is as foolish as the dying nag he works with." They saw his project as an affront, a poor man daring to dream he could change his fate. They secretly hoped he would fail, as his success would be an inconvenient testament to the power of perseverance, something their inherited wealth had taught them nothing about. But the young man did not give up. Against all odds, the land began to change. The soil, once hard and pale, became darker and richer as he worked in compost and manure. He planted the few seeds he had managed to acquire, and to everyone's astonishment, small green shoots began to push their way through the earth. He and Hope had done it. They had brought life back to a place that had been dead for generations. The first harvest was small, but it was more than the land had ever produced. He was able to feed himself and Hope, with a little left over to sell at the market. With the money, he bought better seeds and a stronger plow. The next season, the harvest doubled, and the season after that, it doubled again. His small patch of land became a lush, green oasis in the middle of the dusty valley, a vibrant splash of color against a backdrop of brown and gray. Word of the miracle farm spread throughout the region. People came from all around to see the land that a poor boy and a dying donkey had reclaimed. They saw fields of healthy corn, rows of thriving vegetables, and a man who now stood tall, his eyes clear and his voice steady. He was no longer the boy who lowered his head in shame. He was a man who had built his future with his own two hands. One day, the rich landowner who had paid him with the donkey rode by on his magnificent steed. He stopped and stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. He saw the lush fields, the strong stone walls, and the healthy, powerful donkey, the very same one he had cast off to die, standing proudly beside its master. The young man met his gaze, not with hatred or triumph, but with a quiet, unshakable dignity. The landowner, the man who had everything, felt a strange and unfamiliar feeling, a pang of shame so deep it made him feel small. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps to offer a backhanded compliment, or to try and buy the land, but the words caught in his throat. In the face of what this young man had accomplished against all the odds, against the mockery of him and all the other rich men, there was nothing he could say. His wealth felt hollow, his power meaningless. And the landowner, the most powerful man in the valley, lowered his head without saying a word. If you enjoyed this beautiful story and reflection, don't forget to share it with anyone you think might find it useful. Like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos and new reflections for your life. See you in the next video. Bye.